Okay, so this is about to upset some people. And honestly, I'm okay with that. Because one thing my daddy taught me is that hit dogs holler. There's gonna be a lot of hit dogs in my comments and in my DMs. Not because I throw rocks at dogs. They just ran in front of my target. What I am about to say goes against standard teaching, but not against the Bible. Here's the thing. There is a conversation that's been argued for centuries, literally centuries. Councils have been held. Denominations have split. Careers have been built on one interpretation, and entire movements have been launched to tear that interpretation down. And if you don't read or understand the original language, you're bound to the interpreter's point of view. Then that interpreter's point of view is now in the hands of someone else who takes that interpretation and builds something based off of what it means to them. So by the time it gets to you, you're not reading what the Bible says. You're reading what someone thinks it meant. Filter through what someone else thinks that person meant, wrapped in a denominational structure that may or may not have anything to do with what God actually said. And that's the problem. Now, I need to be honest with you up front. What we're about to talk about can't be discussed in one sitting. This isn't something we can rush through and move on. This is kind of a tough pill to swallow, and it needs to be broken up into pieces to be able to digest. We are going to be questioning the narrative and honoring the text. And if you're not ready for that, you might want to sit this one out. But if you're ready to dig deeper, if you're ready to challenge what you've been taught and see what the Bible actually says, then stay with me, because this is going to take more than one conversation. And I promise you, it's worth it. So join me as we challenge the narrative and honor the text. Now, before we get too far into this, we have to understand the foundation of trust and submission, which is love. Love isn't just a feeling. It's not just something you say. Love is the greatest gift we've been given. And when love is present, when it's mature, when it's fully developed, it produces something. It produces trust. 1 Corinthians 13:13. Now abide faith, hope, love. These three. But the greatest of these is love. The greatest, not salvation. Salvation is the result of love, not grace. Grace flows from love, not even faith, because faith works through love. And trust produces the thing we've been arguing about for centuries. Not forced, not manipulated, willing. The thing that says, I trust you enough to follow you because I've seen where you've been and I know where you're going. But here's the problem. Love is the greatest gift we've been given, which means it's also the most attacked. Every broken marriage, every fractured relationship, every church split, every family torn apart, it all comes back to a failure of love. Not a failure of rules, not a failure of authority, a failure of love. And when love fails, trust disappears. And when trust disappears, the thing we've been arguing about becomes impossible. Not because people are rebellious, because there's nothing safe to line up under. So if we're going to talk about what everyone's been fighting about, we need to start with love. And if we're going to talk about love, we need to talk about who's responsible for modeling it. Society has created roles. Gender roles have determined expectations, and those expectations have produced environments where people are confused, frustrated, and honestly exhausted. Women feel controlled. Men feel disrespected. Marriages are falling apart. Churches are splitting, and everyone's pointing fingers at everyone else, but no one's asking the right questions. Nobody is asking who was given the responsibility first. Nobody's asking what the design actually was before we added our interpretations, our traditions, our cultural baggage. Nobody's asking what happens when the foundation is missing. Stay with me, because this isn't about tearing men down. This is about building us back up the way God designed us to function in the first place. This isn't to argue with positions or roles women are supposed to play in the context or denominational structure. I don't argue with the rules of men. This is about the responsibilities God has given and who he gave them to. People assign positions. God assigns responsibilities. And if we're going to talk about what everyone's been arguing about for years, we need to start with who God gave the responsibility to first. Spoiler alert, it wasn't the women. The word everyone argues about, isn't what we think it is. Let's correct something right now before we go any further. The thing we've been arguing about for centuries, submission, it's not obedience. Obedience is compliance. Obedience is doing what you're told because you have to. This is something entirely different. In the Greek, this word comes from a military term that means to arrange under, to place an order under. It's voluntary. It's a choice. You're choosing to line up under someone's leadership because you trust where they're going. But here's the key. You can't line up under someone who isn't lined up under God. And that's where everything breaks down. Because most of the teaching on this topic skips the part where men are told to do it first. And that's what we're going to unpack. Not in one sitting. Not in one video, because this is too important to rush through. This is the foundation that's been missing. And if we don't get this right, nothing else will work. Most people know 1 Timothy chapter 2 for one verse, verse 12. I do not permit a woman to teach or to have authority over a man. She must be silent. That verse has been used to silence women, to control women, to keep women out of leadership, out of pulpits, out of conversations. Entire denominations have been built on that one verse. Careers have been made, books have been written, arguments have been had. But that's not where the chapter starts. And if we skip the beginning, you've missed the entire point. So watch this. Paul is writing to Timothy about a church in Ephesus that's out of order. And when I say out of order, I mean chaotic. The church in Ephesus was dealing with false teachers, men and women, who were promoting twisted doctrines. Some of these false teachings were rooted in the cult Artemis, where women held religious authority and taught that women were spiritually superior to men. Ephesus was the center of Artemis worship. The temple of Artemis was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. And in that temple, women were the priestesses. Women held the power. Women controlled the narrative. That cult taught that the female goddess created the male god, that women were spiritually superior, that men were beneath them in the divine order. And some of that teaching had infiltrated the church. So when Paul addresses this, he's not giving a universal command that women can never teach. He's addressing a specific cultural problem where women were trying to dominate and take control in a way that wasn't submitted to God's order. They were bringing the cult of Artemis into the church and trying to flip the design upside down. Sounds like what happens today. People may not be bringing Artemis into the church, but they've brought something else. Pride, sexism, dictatorship, greed, should I say more? And have flipped the design upside down. But here's what we miss. Paul doesn't start by correcting women. He starts by correcting the men. 1 Timothy 2, verse 8. I desire, therefore, that the men pray everywhere, lifting up holy hands without wrath and doubting. The men, not the women, the men. Paul is saying, men, you need to take your proper place in ministry. You need to pray everywhere, in every place, in every situation, and you need to lift up holy hands. Now pause. Why would Paul start here? Why would he tell men to pray before he tells women anything? Because the foundation was missing. The men weren't doing their job. And if the men aren't doing their job, the whole system breaks down. Now, here's what's important. Paul says to lift up holy hands. The word holy here, it means different, set apart, consecrated. He's saying lift them differently. Lift them without wrath and doubting. The word for wrath here means anger, indignation, a settled disposition of hostility. This isn't a momentary frustration. This is a posture, a pattern, and a way of approaching God that says, I'm angry and I'm not letting it go. And the word for doubting here, it means disputing, questioning, reasoning. It's not honest questioning. It's arguing with God. It's coming to him with a posture that says, I don't trust you. Why would Paul say that if this wasn't an issue? The posture of men in worship had to be opposite of what Paul is telling them to do. Men were lifting their hands in anger. Men were raising their hands as they questioned God. Men were lifting their hands with a posture that said, I'm doing this, but I don't trust you. Paul's saying, men, when you come to God, put aside your anger. Put aside your need to argue. Put aside your need to be right. That's the thing we've been arguing about for centuries. And Paul is telling men to do it before he ever tells a woman to do anything. Think about it. Before Paul says anything to a woman about silence, about teaching, about authority, he tells men to pray, to lift their hands, to surrender their anger and their doubts. Because if men don't do this first, nothing else works. Now, women, let me tell you something. God was giving y'all some game. 1 Timothy chapter 2, verse 11. Let a woman learn in silence with all submission. Okay, don't get frustrated. Don't get mad at me. Don't turn me off. Just check this out. Check this out. He says to learn in silence with all submission. We're going to address those passages later, but let's get this game right now. What are you learning? Why are you silent? What are you submitting to? Those are the questions that you need to ask, opposed to getting mad to what Paul just said, because this points directly back to the instructions given to men. You are learning what kind of man he is. You're silent to watch and listen, submitting to what you see. Meaning, if he submits to God like this, you know what kind of man he is. If he doesn't, then you know what kind of man he is. Learn, listen. So when he shows you who he is, believe him. Submit to that. Don't try to change it. You know what happens sometimes. I mean, if I could help, if I can just show him how, that's not your job. You want to know if he's a good man? You're worried about his job, his car, whether he opens the door, whether he calls you back, whether he says he's a Christian man. Let me tell you something. A man can have a good job and have a bad heart. A man can drive a nice car and have a terrible spirit. A man can open every door for you and still lead you straight to hell. A man can tell you he's a Christian and not know the first thing about what it means to follow Christ. A man can quote scriptures and still be full of wrath. A man can lead worship and still be full of doubt. A man can preach on Sundays and still have no idea of how to surrender to God. So how do you know? Watch how he reveres God. Watch how he honors God. Does he line up under God? Does he pray? Does he lift his hands in worship? Or does he stand there with his arms crossed like he's doing God a favor by showing up? Does he talk to God with humility, or does he talk to God with demands? Does he come to God with wrath, or does he come with surrender? Does he come with doubting, or does he come with trust? If he can't go before God with the right posture, where is he leading you? And that's the real question, because leadership in scripture is distinguished by the example set. Hebrews 13:7. Remember those who rule over you, who have spoken the word of God to you, whose faith follow, considering the outcome of their conduct. The word follow here, it means to imitate, to mimic. Leadership is about setting an example. It's about conduct, which means behavior, manner of life. It's about where you've been and what you've demonstrated. And if a man hasn't demonstrated what it looks like to line up under God, he has nothing to teach a woman about lining up under him. So don't just listen to what he says. Watch what he does. Watch how he treats God, because how he treats God is how he'll eventually treat you. Does he pray without wrath? Does he worship without doubting? Does he surrender to God, or does he argue with God? If he can't surrender to God, he can't teach you how to surrender to him. If he can't trust God, he can't expect you to trust him. If he comes to God with anger, he'll come to you with anger. Paul is literally telling you to watch, to listen, to learn, not because you're incapable, but because you can't learn what he hasn't lived. Look, if this is hitting you right now, if you're realizing that there's more to this than what you've been taught, I want to invite you into something. Subscribe to this channel or to the podcast so you don't miss any parts of this. Hit your notifications, because we're going back to Genesis, and what we're about to unpack is going to challenge everything you thought you knew about Adam, Eve, and what actually happened in the garden. If you want to go deeper, I write about this every week in my newsletter. You can sign up by clicking the link in the description. And if you're ready to really dig in, if you want to be a part of a community that's rethinking faith, asking the hard questions, and challenging the narrative, join our community. It's where we go deeper, process together, and hold space for the tough questions. This isn't just content. This is a conversation, and I want you in on it. Okay, so back to this. Listen, a woman can't teach a man what he hasn't learned. What do you mean? A woman cannot teach a man what submission looks like. That's not her assignment. She can't model it for him. She can't demonstrate it for him. She can't show him how to lay down his anger, how to lift his hands, how to surrender to God. That's his job. Some women will only hear a woman can't teach and miss the part that will save her countless heartbreaks and abuse by men. If he hasn't learned it, if he hasn't lived it, if he hasn't modeled it, then he has nothing to teach her. This is why 1 Timothy chapter 2 starts with men. It doesn't flow upward, it flows outward. God submits to nothing, but he models love. Men submit to God and they model what they've received. Women submit to men who are submitted to God and they reflect what's been modeled. But if the man isn't submitted to God, the whole system breaks down. Not because women are rebellious, because there's no foundation. Man. If you're not humble enough to establish what worship looks like to God and show this without wrath and doubting, how is a woman to learn how not to show you those same traits? She can't trust you because you don't trust God. She can't help but doubt you because you doubt God. And here's what gets me. We've spent centuries arguing about what women are supposed to do, and we've completely ignored what men are supposed to do first. We've built entire theological systems on verse 12, and we skipped verse 8. We've told women to be silent, and we've never asked men to pray. We've told women to submit, and we've never asked men to surrender. That's the problem. So what happens when the foundation is missing? Here's what most people miss when they read 1 Timothy chapter 2. Paul isn't just correcting behavior. He's correcting a design that's been broken since Genesis. And if you don't understand what happened in the garden, you'll never understand what Paul is saying to Timothy. This isn't just about worship. This isn't just about prayer. This isn't just about men lifting their hands without wrath and doubting. This is about responsibility. This is about who God gave the assignment to first. This is about what happens when men don't model what God established. And that's what we're digging into on this next video. Part 2 of this, we're going back to Genesis. We're going to talk about Adam and Eve, about the serpent and the fall, about transgression and sin. We're going to talk about why Paul says Eve was deceived, but Adam wasn't. We're going to talk about what it means to establish truth versus maintaining truth. And we're going to talk about what happens when men don't do their job. God establishes truth. Men model it. Women maintain it. Again, this is not about positions. This is about responsibilities. Men aren't better. Women aren't less. We are partners and both have responsibilities. But when you don't understand your responsibility, you end up fighting for a position that was never yours to begin with. And when you fight for the wrong position, you abandon the responsibility that was. Men have spent centuries demanding submission without ever demonstrating surrender. Women have spent centuries trying to maintain what was never modeled. And we wonder why marriages are falling apart. We wonder why churches are dividing, and we wonder why nobody trusts anybody anymore. It's because the foundation was never laid. And when men don't model it, the whole system breaks down. Not because women failed, because the foundation was never laid. You can't build a house on sand and expect it to stand when the storm comes. You can't demand fruit from a tree you've never planted. You can't expect trust when you've never demonstrated faithfulness. You can't expect submission when you've never shown surrender. And that's what we've been doing for centuries. We have been arguing about the fruit while ignoring the root. Whew, man, this is a tough pill to swallow, but it's worth it. Because if we get this right, everything else falls into place. If we get this wrong, nothing works. Not your marriage, not your ministry, not your relationship, nothing. Because love is the foundation. Trust is built on love. Submission flows from trust. But if men don't model what it looks like to line up under God, there's nothing for a woman to line up under. If men don't surrender to God, there's no example of what surrender looks like. If men don't trust God, there's no foundation for anyone else to trust them. So on part 2 of this, we're going back to the beginning, back to the garden, back to where the design was established and where it was broken. Because if you don't understand what happened there, you'll keep repeating the same mistakes. You'll keep demanding what you haven't demonstrated. You'll keep blaming others for what you never modeled. And the cycle will never end. But it can end. It starts with understanding the design. It starts with men taking responsibility. It starts with love. Stay with me. We going somewhere, y'all.